Counter-Narrative News brings you a special report today for Friday the 10th of February 2023. We would like to explore an incident that has taken place recently and the comments and analysis and conversations around which will also pertain to other global communities, not just this one specific one impacted as it pertains to divisions amongst the most oppressed working class groups and tensions of unity and division, and how the colonial racist state is navigating this for their own interests, and how communities might be falling indirectly or directly for those divisions, or maybe the challenges to overcome them. So there was an incident outside a high school just outside southwest London in North Surrey, in which a group of Irish traveller women and girls are seen in a video cowardly attacking a black high school female student. Two older women seem to be involved in the attack on the one black girl, with two other younger girls joining in. There is nothing explicitly in the footage to suggest there's anything explicitly racist about the attack, but just the picture, obviously, of what many have called with some justification a mob of white people attacking a black schoolgirl definitely has literally the picture of a racist attack. However, looking deeper into this, it becomes the whole situation becomes quite problematic and worrying, and much cause for concern, because we're talking about two of the most oppressed groups here. On the one hand, you have the Irish traveller community, who are seen as quote-unquote white, but one of the most despised in terms of British racism, marginalised, oppressed and precarious groups, and indeed racialised groups as Irish travellers. And then on the other hand, you have the black African heritage working class community.
Move! Move! Get him back, mate! Get him back, mate! Get him back, mate! Harley,
away.
Harley, get on her!
No, can we let go? No,
Get on her, Harley!
Beeson, you bull fish.
That's it now, come on! That's it!
As you can see, it's quite disturbing footage. Really, hearts and solidarity goes out to the black girl who's attacked and to her closest family, giving her support right now. Obviously, she's not in a great state after the attack. It's clearly a cowardly attack. Adults should not be engaged in such disgusting behaviour. But also questions have to be asked primarily in terms of holding the school to account. Where was the staff outside the school? Why did they not intervene sooner? Why did what seems to be someone from the senior leadership of the school intervene in such a belated and nonchalant way, which has been picked up by many people actually, and understandably this has caused much upset and a just reaction from particularly the black community, but not just them. Looking into this and researching, it seems that there is nothing immediately racialized that comes out in terms of what led and the attack itself. The black girl claims that she was defending another white girl who was being bullied by the girls from the Irish traveller community, and around that fracas, obviously what appears to be some adults, perhaps parents of Irish traveller schoolgirls, decide to conduct that disgusting attack. Now, if the fallout from this incident, and we'll come to this more in a few moments, but the fallout from this has been a great division between some sections of the black community and some sections of the Irish traveller community. And that's not surprised, considering the incident as the footage that you're privy to and that you can see, but also the reaction from some people in the black community has been decidedly racist itself, using racialized slurs against the Irish traveller community in this particular regards with the P word. Please forgive oneself for using the word, but the term pikey has been used. And it's a very sad state of affairs and feeds right into the agenda of the British racist colonial state to be dividing some of the most oppressed racialized communities in this way. A lot of Irish traveller WhatsApp groups are claiming that this is some kind of BLM, i.e. Black Lives Matter, attack on the Irish traveller community, which is a really, really disastrous and sad state of affairs and a development out of this. And on the other hand, as aforementioned, a few people from the black community, but those who have conducted a mobilization in the community in which this attack has taken place, have also decided to use that P word, which is really sad. The context, the greater context to this is that we all are living as oppressed communities in this state called the British state, which is violently racist and violently colonial, and is increasing its racist colonial oppression and exploitation globally against the global working classes, particularly of the global south, and also the working classes in this country around growing poverty, the so-called cost of living crisis, but also instrumentalizing politically in the direction of the far right, and what many are arguing is new fascism by the far right Tory state and the royal family that's in deepening crisis in terms of delivering Brexit. Brexit was the formalization of far-right politics deposited into the British government and to the British state. So out of that comes the Grenfell massacre, and there's no strategic reaction from the grassroots for justice around that. Same with the attack on the African Caribbean community around the Windrush scandal, horrific attack in making people feel precarious about their residency and permanent position here from the Caribbean community. The ongoing racist policing, including Child Q, the hundreds of school children that are strip searched, disproportionately up to 60% black school children, the Child Q controversy, the Sarah Everard rape and killing, the David Carrick police crisis. It's a massive growing crisis in policing. The far-right Tories are also using the Rwanda expulsion strategy and also instrumentalizing small boats and migrants and refugees. So in all of these contexts, what's taking place here in this division, this at the moment growing division between two oppressed communities, the Irish travellers and the black community, feeds straight into all of these agendas of oppression, all of these policies, these racist policies, dividing oppressed people and not uniting them strategically for our collective interests is benefiting the colonial and capitalist enemy and is failing our communities. There's no other but, to be very blunt about that. In connection with that as well, is what most recently happened last year in Leicester, which is the first city in Britain which is a majority population of non-white residents. And you would have thought that a city like that would have seen the unity of black and brown communities, but no, 2022 saw the marching of working class Asians against another group of working class Asians, divided amongst those who are Hindu and those who are Muslim. So again, you can see the state is successfully achieving this divide and rule policy, this racist divide and rule policy, so it can divide working class people, so it can facilitate and deliver its own interest of profiteering and racialized divisions. Around that is an interesting figure of Tommy Robinson, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who's a vanguard far-right leader in this country, and considering his moves since 2008 and his very provocative, racist street movement of the English Defence League and other racist endeavours, it's likely he has collusion at the very least from the British intelligence services, as he is delivering very much British state policy, frankly. Now, the person who mobilised up to around 150 to 200 black people at one of the residences of the Irish traveller women who conducted the attack on the schoolgirl, a person called Respect Fire Bingi, has spent many years campaigning against Tommy Robinson, Yaxley Lennon on social media, etc. But in the last week, shares a platform with Tommy Robinson on a podcast. Now, it's an absolute, nearly universal principle that you never share a platform with the far right or fascists or organized racists. Rather, the only contact to have with them is a by any means necessary militant anti-racist and anti-fascist approach, which was actually delivered on June the 13th, 2020, when Tommy Robinson threatened black youth in that summer And then he was on a retreat, and then June the 13th saw a black-led but also brown youth and also white working class youth united in Trafalgar Square and Waterloo Station in central London, who smashed these organised racists of the National Front variety, racist football hooligans, English Defence League types, around the DFLA, the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, which is just a front name for another bunch of violent racist and far-right activists. They were defeated in a historic victory that Raspect was also involved with. So considering Raspect has campaigned against Yaxley Lennon, was involved in June the 13th, 2020, as well other formations, particularly on the radical left, the London Black Revs and the Malcolm X movement, then why sit down on a platform with Tommy Robinson and not even come out of that having won that quote-unquote debate on that platform, on that podcast? Anyway, just a short clip from that podcast, which again you can see the host, who's unfortunately a younger black person who uses the P word against Asians, in this context Pakistanis. Again, so please forgive using this word, but the P word in the context, the word called Paki, is totally unacceptable. And then you have a kind of a ripple of laughter after he uses it. And obviously Tommy Robinson is very happy that he's used that because he doesn't have to. But also the P word in the context of the Irish travellers was used also by Raspect.
I realise you're just racist towards Pakis.
No.
I went mad. I went mad. No. But obviously, I'm from Walthamstow. I'm from Walthamstow, innit? Nah, you lot are going mad. No, but I went mad.
Imagine I said that.
Look, you went mad.
You have said it before.
Yeah, you said it. Yeah, you're going mad.
Back these roads. I don't know what the flag is. Family's taking back our turn. Our children will be protected. Our children will be told. I don't know what you've been told. Family's taking back these roads. Family's taking back these roads. I don't know what the flag is heard. I don't know what the flag is heard. Family's taking back our turn. Family's taking back our turn. Our children will be protected.
Then at this mobilisation at the apparent residence of one of the Irish traveller attackers that Raspect helps to lead, you also have comments from the participants talking about potential violent intent in responding to the mob attack against the black high school girl. Please see here.
Bring a shooter, we're not going to bring a rocket launcher, we're going to come with ours too. And we're not scared, you know.
The police have a very light presence at this protest at this residential area. There's only one police officer who seems to be present. No doubt he has backup close by. It's very interesting, the policing approach. Now, the police have made 5 arrests in relation to the attack on the black schoolgirl outside the high school. And they seem to be charged with racially aggravated assault or racially aggravated actual bodily harm, according to the police statements in this regard. So those 5 arrests have been made, and a lot of people in the black community, as mentioned before, are right to hold the school to account, to say it's actually on the school's watch that this happened, and they need to do, they've basically failed in safeguarding their own pupils outside their school gates. So that is correct. The police have made arrests and charged people here. But it's very interesting that the police have really leaned back from any kind of even heavy presence subsequent to the attack. They've been very defensive and been quite relatively proactive in the context in making these arrests. There's another young woman who they're seeking, I think a 15-year-old, if one is not mistaken. But it's interesting because for the police and the state to have working class communities, the most oppressed, the most exploited, the most poorest, to be marching on each other and not against the police, considering David Carrick, considering Wayne Couzens, the Chris Carber racist murder, the Child Q issue, I mean, should people be united and marching against the police on these issues, or should people be marching on other racialized communities despite horrible things happen between us? This issue really has to be discussed. So here's the clip of a short clip of the police interacting with the mobilization.
I don't care what the CPS do.
Come
I
on.
don't care what the government do.
Come on.
We're going to make sure our children are protected.
Yes.
And that's why we're
Yes.
here.
Can I just,
Yes.
just one at a time, please?
Yes.
All I ask for the time being is that people remain peaceful and be conscious of that. If I could, please, if I can.
In concluding remarks, one has to reflect upon how communities navigate situations like this in accordance with the best interest of sectional communities themselves and also the united oppressed working class communities, particularly black and brown, but Irish travellers are also very oppressed and treated in a very racist manner, as are some other very oppressed groups like Albanians, Roma, and others as well. The question is, do we want to see a pushback against the racist state in the interests of improving the schooling, which schools are, and the education system is failing all working class children? Do we want to push back in a united way as united working class people, led by the most oppressed sections, very much so, on the issues of housing, which is a growing problem for ourselves, policing, as mentioned before, general services as it pertains to sports and culture and others, which are being privatized and whittling away. The state and the local colonial state is taking away all these things from us and our children and our families. Do we want to build strategic bridges of unity, or do we want to build strategic collapse of disunity, which the state has and will continue to benefit from? That is the fundamental question here. Really, it's correct to hold the school to account and the authorities in this regard. But in relation to incidents like this, we have to reach out. Now, if sections of the black community approach the Irish traveller community, probably the head person at the Irish traveller camp, a dialogue, a constructive dialogue can be had in which still people are held to account, but in a framework of seeking unity and understanding and overcoming these divisions, even if they're violent incidents themselves. In this framework, restorative justice is a framework that very much can be seen as a useful one, in which the perpetrators of that cowardly attack are encouraged and then hopefully deliver sitting down with their victim and the victim's immediate family, or whoever the victim feels comfortable to be with, and apologize and to reflect and to have a dialogue of apology, reflection, of repairing, and then uniting and arguing, look, our interests are largely the same. We are both treated in a racist manner. We are both experiencing greater poverty, harder to pay our bills, harder to buy our food, harder to enjoy leisure and holidays with our children and our families, and more policing, racist policing against all of us in our schools, in our workplaces, in our streets, etc., etc., etc. So this really is what people should be reflecting upon at the moment. What's happening is actually a disaster in which the racists and the police state and the Tory state and the monarchist state are all laughing their heads off, and people on the ground are largely doing their work for them. Tommy Robinson was laughing when the P word was used on him hosting the podcast. So that's a very graphic, illustrative example of how Tommy Robinson, Yaxi Lennon, as a representative of the racist agenda of the British state, is laughing at racialized, oppressed communities dividing off each other on his and the state's agenda. Counter-narrative news would really encourage people to really think about frameworks of unity in struggle that's just and that's correct and that's fair, that holds people to account in a correct and appropriate manner in defense of vulnerable children. But there's vulnerable children on both sides here. Although, albeit admittedly, one section has attacked the other section in a cowardly manner. But the question remains, do we want unity so we can achieve more things for ourselves? Because unity is not delivering something for someone else. It's about delivering for oneself and oneself's community. And what are the frameworks of unity that we can develop? There's political blackness, There's Malcolm X's concept of the Black Revolution as he lays it out in the message to the grassroots. There is the concept of third world communities within the West itself, internal colonized communities as it were. So these are some of the frameworks that we can use. That was most illustratively shown and delivered in the victory of June the 13th, 2020 itself. And everything subsequent to that, in terms of Tommy Robinson being hosted on podcasts being run by black people, in terms of the increasing divisions of Asians marching on Asians, of black people marching on Irish travellers, etc., 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 all of these really have to be resisted, and we must look for unity in struggle, because we have no other tool, no other proverbial weapon to use here but that. That's Counter Narrative News bringing you this special report. Please do support us. We are the only real daily news analysis and advocacy service that seeks to do what we do through the loyalty and the lens of supporting black liberation in oppressed communities and the anti-colonial struggle. Thank you very much.